Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to a time when road trip meant sand in your teeth, blistered feet, and the constant threat of bandits. You've woken up in a Silk Road caravanserai, a crumbling stone compound nestled between two dunes, somewhere east of Persia and west of anywhere with plumbing. Camels grunt nearby. A rooster is crowing from a roof beam even though there's no farm in sight. The air smells like dust, horse sweat, and last night's lentil stew. Welcome to your first and possibly last day on the ancient Silk Road. There's a ragged blanket tangled around your legs, your back is sore from sleeping on straw, and someone else's elbow is digging into your ribs. You sit up and immediately regret it. Your mouth feels like you've licked the inside of a parchment scroll. Outside, someone is already shouting about missing socks, and a merchant is arguing, loudly and in at least 3 languages, about a goat that may or may not have been stolen in the night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is in your part of the world. Hopefully, it's not the middle of the desert like this. The Silk Road isn't one road, by the way. It's a tangled web of trade routes stretching from China to the Mediterranean, and you've landed somewhere smack in the middle. This caravanserai is meant to be a safe haven for merchants and travelers. Safe is a generous word. The walls are pockmarked from old arrows. There's a guard asleep at the front gate, snoring louder than the camels. A wrinkled man with no teeth offers you something in a bowl. It might be porridge. It might be mashed turnips. It might also be some combination of sand and regret. You decline with a polite nod, which he interprets as an enthusiastic yes. Congratulations. You now own the bowl. And maybe his second cousin. As the other travelers stir, you notice how international this group is. There's a Persian trader folding up silk bundles, a Chinese alchemist carefully wrapping clay jars, and a guy from Venice counting coins and pretending not to be panicked. You're surrounded by languages, smells, and an overwhelming sense that everyone here is slightly more prepared than you are. A woman walks by carrying a cage full of chirping songbirds, and you realize with some confusion that this might be breakfast for someone. Or a bribe. Or both. 2 boys chase each other past you with a pig bladder ball, nearly tripping over your feet. In the corner, someone is trimming a falcon's talons. Meanwhile, your own belongings, what little you were told to bring, fit into a modest satchel, a single water skin, some stale bread, and a coin pouch that already feels much too light. You're wearing a rough linen tunic and wool leggings that itch in places you didn't know could itch. The caravan master strolls through the courtyard, cracking a stick against the stones. "Half an hour," he bellows. "If you're not packed, you'll be left to the dogs and scorpions." This seems less like a metaphor and more like a likely outcome. You rush to gather your things, but your boots are missing. Someone kindly points out that the blacksmith's son used them to fetch water. From where? The well, they say, gesturing vaguely toward a smudge on the horizon. Just outside town. Wonderful. You retrieve the boots, wet, now, and return to find that the merchant next to you has sold your blanket. "You weren't using it," he says, shrugging. You can't argue with that kind of logic. You also can't get it back. As the caravan prepares to leave, there's a minor commotion. A teenage camel has decided it will not walk today. It sits stubbornly, making noises that can only be described as emotional protest. 2 drivers attempt to coax it forward with a combination of shouting, yanking, and something involving dried figures. The camel responds by spitting. While this plays out, you're ushered to your assigned mount, a donkey named Khosrow, who seems offended by your mere presence. He glares at you as if you've personally insulted his lineage. The saddle is made of wood and covered with something that used to be leather. Probably. Maybe. Before you can protest, someone ties your satchel to the saddle and slaps the donkey on the rear. Khosrow lurches forward, and you are officially on your way. The caravan creaks and groans into motion. Wheels squeak. Hooves clomp. A toddler starts wailing and doesn't stop for the next 2 hours. The sun isn't fully up yet, but it's already hot. The wind kicks up dust that sticks to your face like glue. A passing traveler, possibly a poet, judging by the ink stains on his sleeves, warns you not to breathe through your mouth unless you enjoy the taste of camel hair and ash. You test his theory and immediately regret it. As the road unfolds before you, winding through barren hills and cracked riverbeds, a realization dawns on you. This isn't a quaint journey through history. It's a test of endurance. And you're already behind. You haven't even made it half a mile before the blisters start to form. The sandals you bought, what did the merchant call them? Authentic step-ready craftsmanship, are already rubbing your heels raw. The straps keep slipping, and every time you try to adjust them, Khosrow the donkey takes it as a signal to stop walking and stare into the horizon, contemplating his life choices. By the time the sun crests over the dunes, the caravan is stretching out into a loose line, winding between rocks and shrubs that seem to exist purely to stab you. You're near the back, behind a cart that smells like old onions and damp wool. It creaks and shudders with every bump, and you're starting to suspect it might fall apart entirely by lunchtime. The path isn't marked by signs or helpful maps. Instead, it's a matter of squinting into the distance and trusting the grizzled caravan master, who seems to be navigating by smell and vague memories. He pauses occasionally to sniff the air or lick a pebble, then mutters still west before motioning onward. You're already regretting your breakfast. Not because of any illness, though that may still be coming, but because you dropped half of it trying to mount your donkey. Now your stomach groans with every step, reminding you that cold lentil mush doesn't last long in a body rapidly sweating out its water supply. You try talking to one of your fellow travelers, a middle-aged man with ink-stained fingers and a scholarly look. He turns out to be a scribe from Samarkand, traveling west to find rare scrolls. You ask him about the safest route through the mountains, and he replies with a proverb that makes absolutely no sense. The falcon does not question the wind, but flies anyway. Thanks, extremely helpful. The group stops briefly at a small outpost, a crumbling mud structure with a single shady tree and a merchant selling lukewarm water at suspiciously high prices. You hand over 2 copper coins, which feels like an insultingly large amount for something that smells faintly of goat skin. Still, you drink it gratefully. While you refill your water skin, you overhear a loud argument. A silk trader from Kasha is furious because his assistant apparently mislabeled the dye bundles, and now he can't tell the royal indigo from the moldy purple. The assistant insists that it's not mold, it's natural aging. They both look at you, and you quickly pretend to be very interested in your sandals. By mid-morning, the sun is unforgiving. The heat sits on your shoulders like a heavy, wet blanket, and the air tastes like dust and regret. You adjust your headscarf, grateful for the one piece of advice that turned out to be helpful: cover your neck, or lose it to the sun. Some poor fool didn't listen. He's already looking like a boiled beet and muttering about rivers that don't exist. There's a boy walking beside your donkey, selling sweet-smelling herbs to chew for strength and luck. He insists that Marco Polo once chewed these very same leaves. You ask him how that's possible. He shrugs and walks away, offering the same pitch to someone else. You chew one anyway. It tastes like soap and old basil. Every time you think you're making progress, the road curves into another impossible bend or dips into a gulch. The terrain is uneven, dry, cracked clay in some places, shifting sand in others. Your donkey stumbles occasionally but seems to know the path better than you. You're beginning to understand why traders traveled in groups. This place would eat a lone traveler in a matter of hours. One of the cart drivers begins singing. It's a low, nasal chant that echoes across the landscape. Others join in, humming or tapping the sides of their wagons. It's oddly comforting, this rhythmic noise of old wheels, soft song, and the occasional bray of an unamused camel. For a moment, you almost forget your chafing boots and parched throat. Then, someone yells. It's the caravan leader again. He's discovered that two of the porters have gotten into a fight, apparently over who owns a half-eaten melon. The melon itself is now rolling down a hill, followed by a small cluster of yelling men and one dog. You watch the chase unfold in slow motion, uncertain whether to laugh or worry. You get your answer when the caravan is ordered to halt. Everyone dismounts while the leader sorts out the dispute with a series of shouts, hand gestures, and finally a coin toss. Somehow, this is considered fair. No one seems surprised. You sit on a rock and try to eat the second half of your bread, now speckled with sand and lint. It's delicious compared to this morning's bowl of mystery mush. Just when you think the day can't get more surreal, a group of travelers joins the caravan from the east. They're clearly from India, bringing crates of spices and woven cloth. One of them offers you a palmful of cloves for the road. You thank him, chew one, and immediately cough for 5 minutes. He smiles and nods. Good for the lungs. Eventually, the caravan begins moving again. Your donkey has resumed glaring at you, and your legs are already sore from the jostling saddle. You can feel your sunburn setting in beneath the dust. The horizon hasn't changed at all, and you're beginning to suspect that this road is less of a path and more of an elaborate endurance test. There's no GPS, no landmarks, and no comforting rest stops with vending machines. Only the occasional tumbleweed and the hopeful sight of vultures overhead. You remember someone saying that vultures are good luck. Or maybe it was the opposite. Either way, they're circling, and it's not exactly encouraging. Up ahead, you hear someone calling for a break. Apparently, a mule lost its load of porcelain jars, and everyone is now trying to dig them out of the sand before the heat warps them. You slide off your donkey and sit under the shade of the cart, trying not to think about how much farther you have to go, or how this is still just morning prep. You're still rubbing sand out of your eyes when you start to notice that some of your travel companions are off. Not suspicious in the criminal sense, though, who knows, but in that unnerving, quietly chaotic way that only long-term Silk Road veterans seem to develop. You're realizing that survival here isn't just about brute strength or clever bartering. It's about the people you end up with. And you, dear traveler, have somehow landed yourself with the strangest caste on this side of the Tian Shan Mountains. To your immediate left rides a man who claims to be a former monk from Tibet. He's bald, draped in orange robes, and travels with a sack full of tiny brass bells that he insists keep away evil spirits. He rings them constantly. They jingle with every step his ox takes, and you're already wondering if the spirits might return just to make him stop. He hasn't blinked in an hour. Behind you is a merchant who says he deals in rare dyes, but he hasn't stopped coughing since sunrise. You offer him water. He declines and pulls out a flask of something that smells like hot vinegar and horsehair. Traditional remedy, he mutters, before taking a long gulp and hacking into the sand. Then there's the flute player. No one knows his name. No one knows where he came from. He plays one tune over and over again, and stares directly at you whenever he does it. He's missing a few teeth and wears a fur-lined cap despite the heat. You begin to wonder if he's part of some ancient punishment you weren't told about. You try making small talk. A polite "where are you headed?" earns you vague gestures. West. Farther. The market. No one seems to have an exact destination. It's as if they're all just flowing like water in a dry riverbed, hoping eventually to arrive somewhere with shade and a pot of stew. Two brothers from Bukhara travel on foot beside a heavily burdened donkey. They keep stopping to adjust its load, which appears to consist entirely of carpets. You ask why they're not riding. Carpets are more valuable, they say in unison. You ask what they're made of. One brother whispers, "Not goat," and then refuses to elaborate. A Persian noblewoman rides past on a white mare, veiled and elegant. She speaks only through her servant, a boy who informs you that she's traveling incognito. When you ask from whom, he shrugs. Probably her husband. You decide not to press. One of the younger travelers, a lanky teenager, keeps trying to sell you a lump of jade the size of a date pit. He insists it's magical. You ask him what kind of magic. It changes color, he whispers, if danger is near. You hold it. It stays exactly the same. He stares at it for a moment, then says, "It takes a while." There's a man in silk robes with a scar down one cheek who claims to be a former pirate. No one asks what a pirate is doing in a desert. He carries a curved dagger and eats only honey and walnuts. You overhear him threatening a spice merchant using only metaphors involving boats and wind. It somehow works. As the sun climbs higher, tempers start to fray. A minor disagreement breaks out between two camel drivers. Apparently one borrowed a pot without asking. Within minutes, they're screaming in overlapping dialects, gesturing wildly, while their camels stand between them, chewing lazily and looking vaguely embarrassed. The caravan master intervenes with all the grace of a tired uncle breaking up a sibling fight. He doesn't scold them, he simply points out that arguing drains energy, and energy is what separates travelers from corpses in this part of the world. The fight ends immediately. Around noon, you pass a traveler coming from the opposite direction. He's alone, barefoot, and carrying a chicken under one arm. He says nothing, simply nods, and keeps walking. No one else seems fazed. The flute player starts playing again, and you seriously consider flinging his instrument into the nearest ravine. You overhear rumors being traded like coins. One group claims there's been a sandstorm to the west that swallowed an entire caravan. Another swears that a Mongol warband is patrolling the hills, demanding tribute from travelers. A third insists that a traveling monk near the mountain passes has learned to float during meditation. By now, you're sweating through your tunic, chafing in places you didn't know had nerves, and growing increasingly convinced that no one in this caravan is entirely stable. But there's a strange camaraderie forming, a shared understanding that the Silk Road isn't a path for normal people. It's a place where boundaries blur, time stretches, and everyone's stories seem just a little too surreal to question. You attempt a conversation with the dime merchant again. Between coughs, he tells you he once traded with the same official 3 times, in 3 different cities, without either of them realizing it. People blur together out here, he says. Places, too. Even names. You might arrive somewhere and forget what you were looking for. He offers you a packet of dried flowers. Good for sleep, he says. You pocket it and thank him. He coughs again. The sky darkens slightly, not from clouds, but from a thin veil of dust kicked up by the travelers ahead. It settles into your hair, your eyebrows, your mouth. You spit and taste salt, leather, and the faintest trace of donkey. You glance around and realize you haven't seen the flute player in some time. Neither has anyone else. Maybe he finally stopped playing, someone jokes. You're not sure whether to feel relieved or unnerved. One of the camels behind you begins making a strained, gurgling noise. You look back and see it attempting to eat the flap of a tent. No one stops it. By late afternoon, you've memorized the sounds of this caravan. The rhythmic groan of wood. The hiss of wind in dry grasses. The muttering of travelers practicing trade phrases in languages they barely understand. A man beside you is rehearsing a poem in Arabic. Another nearby is sketching symbols into the sand with a stick. You suspect he might be inventing a new alphabet. You ride on, blinking through the sun and sweat, with the slow realization that your journey has barely begun, and yet, in the company of these strange, dusty souls, you're already deep in the unpredictable madness of the Silk Road. You finally break for breakfast somewhere along a wind-scoured ridge. It's not a planned stop, Nothing on the Silk Road is planned in the way you might hope. One of the wagon axles started smoking, and a donkey walked straight into a thorn bush and refused to come out. So, the caravan master shrugged, muttered fine, 10 minutes, and everyone more or less collapsed where they stood. You find yourself crouching on a rock, your legs wobbling from hours of bouncing in the saddle. The rock is hot. Your feet are hotter. You remove one sandal to let the blisters breathe, then quickly regret it when a beetle the size of a walnut scuttles underneath. You leap up, nearly twist your ankle, and drop your breakfast in the process. It's not much of a breakfast anyway. A wedge of flatbread you've already bent in half 3 times trying to soften it, and a pouch of what you were told was salted fish. You're not entirely sure it qualifies as either. It smells like regret and chews like a sandal strap. You bite into it anyway, because what else are you going to do? Order pancakes? Nearby, a group of older traders sit in a circle sipping tea from copper cups. You're drawn by the smell, faintly spiced, comforting, but when you try to join, one of them squints at you and says something about novices not knowing how to sit properly. You don't take offense. Mostly because you're too tired to process offense. Instead, you hover awkwardly until someone passes you a cup with a sympathetic grunt. You take a sip. It's lukewarm. Somehow both bitter and overly sweet. And it tastes faintly of saddle? You can't tell if that's part of the blend or just contamination from a poorly rinsed pot. Either way, you drink it all and immediately feel a little steadier. Or maybe just distracted from the flavor of the fish. Over on the far side of the ridge, a few travelers are setting up a tiny brazier to warm beans. You're not sure where the beans came from, or how they found firewood out here. It's best not to ask. One of them stirs the pot with a dagger. Another fans the flames with an old scroll. Someone nearby is eating what looks like cheese, though it crumbles like chalk and smells like it might be trying to escape itself. You ask if it's goat cheese. No, the man replies, chewing thoughtfully. Horse. You smile politely and nod like that makes sense. Then he adds, but only the milk. Not the rest. Good to know. A young woman across from you is peeling dried dates and whispering something into each one before eating it. You stare a moment too long and she raises an eyebrow. Protection, she says, popping one into her mouth. For the road. You make a mental note to ask for one later, just in case. Khosrow, your donkey, has laid down again. On someone's cloak. You try to pull him off, but he pretends to be asleep. The cloak's owner just sighs and starts pulling out the lice. You chew slowly, letting your jaw do most of the thinking, and look out over the landscape. It's the kind of view that would look majestic on a postcard, if postcards had been invented. Endless waves of dunes and dust, broken only by the faint shimmer of heat rising like smoke. The wind whistles low, lifting particles of sand that sting your face like tiny needles. It's beautiful in the kind of way that makes you feel very, very small. You overhear a nearby conversation between 2 traders arguing about the proper route to Merv. One insists it's faster to cut through the plateau. The other swears that way is cursed. Cursed with what? Someone asks. Bad timing, he replies, cryptically. No one questions it. You spot a boy with a sack of dried apricots. He's doing brisk business, trading them for broken combs, bone charms, and once, confusingly, a length of string. You offer him one of your few remaining coins, and he hands you an apricot so dry it practically rattles in your palm. It tastes like sweetened parchment, but you're thrilled anyway. Suddenly, someone yells snake, and everyone jumps to their feet. A dark shape slithers out from under a blanket pile, and 3 people immediately begin hurling stones at it. The flute player appears out of nowhere, hits it with a stick, and walks away again without a word. You wonder, not for the first time, whether he even exists in a normal dimension. As things calm down, the caravan master paces through the resting group, counting heads, inspecting loads. His tunic is soaked through, his expression perpetually unimpressed. "No more delays," he barks. "Eat while walking if you must. We're behind schedule." Someone mutters, "What schedule?" but only after he's out of earshot. Reluctantly, you rise. You try to fold your breakfast pouch, but the fish seems to be fusing with the fabric. You give up and tie the whole thing to your belt like a sad talisman. The tea has given you a second wind, or at least a first gust, and you climb back onto Khosrow with slightly less awkwardness than this morning. The caravan begins to snake forward again, one slow, creaking, clumsy organism. You hear more coughing, the distant plink of the bell monk's charms, and someone humming a lullaby in a language you don't recognize. You take a moment to glance back at the place you just rested. There's no marker, no shelter, no real reason to remember it. But for those 20 minutes, it was your dining room, your living room, your world. That's how things work out here. The Silk Road doesn't give you time to settle in. It gives you just enough to survive the next leg. And you, my friend, have only just finished breakfast. It's hard to say exactly when walking turns into staggering, but somewhere between your third hour back on the trail and your 100th gulp of sand-laced air, you cross that line with full, aching legs. The caravan has reassembled into something resembling a formation: 3 ox carts, 2 mule trains, a scattered group of riders, and you, clinging to the back of your donkey like a sack of laundry with heat stroke. Khosrow has decided that today's tempo will be governed by his moods, which vary wildly every few minutes. One moment he trudges forward with grim purpose, ears flat, tail swishing angrily at invisible flies. The next, he stops dead in the middle of the road, legs locked, as if he's just remembered an ancient grudge. You plead, you prod, you bribe him with a dried apricot. He eats it, then still doesn't move. Respect. Around you, the road narrows into a tight passage flanked by eroded cliffs. Rocks jut out like broken teeth, and the wind seems louder here, funneled through the gap in shrill gusts that sting your eyes and bite at your ears. The smell of sweat and mule dung is briefly replaced by the sharper scent of flint and dried sage. It's still hot, but the shade of the canyon gives you a brief, blessed moment of coolness. Just as you begin to feel hopeful, a dust storm rolls over the ridge behind you. It starts as a whisper, loose grains hissing across stone, and then builds into a full-body slap of wind, grit, and confusion. Someone shouts, "Veils up," and suddenly the air is filled with flapping cloth, panicked animals, and curses in at least 4 different languages. You wrap your scarf tight across your nose and mouth, squinting through the haze. Visibility drops to arm's length. The caravan groans to a halt. You hear a camel wail in protest, and someone loses their footing with a loud thud followed by even louder swearing. Your eyes water as sand needles into every exposed pore. Khosrow, unbothered, lowers his head and stands perfectly still, as if this was always part of the plan. When the storm finally passes, 20 minutes of pure sensory assault, everything and everyone is coated in a fine layer of tan dust. People look like statues. You brush off your shoulders and blink hard. Your left eye refuses to open fully. Great. Your vision now matches your optimism. You check your water skin. It's almost empty, and it tastes faintly of the apricot you tried to wash down earlier. There won't be another refill station until the next outpost, which is, according to the caravan master, about a day's walk if your bones hold. A child points out that the last wheel on one of the carts is wobbling. An older man, clearly the owner, mutters, "It always does that," and waves him off. 10 minutes later, it breaks. The axle gives way with a sharp crack, and the cart lurches sideways into a shallow ravine. Its contents, mostly spices, burst out like confetti. Sacks of turmeric and cumin explode in puffs of yellow and orange, covering nearby travelers like they've been assaulted by a particularly aggressive kitchen spirit. The driver begins shouting. Not because of the loss, He seems almost resigned to that, but because the spilled cargo has attracted a small herd of wild goats from somewhere unseen. Within moments, 4 goats are chewing through his profits while everyone watches in a mix of amusement and horror. The caravan master rubs his temples and mutters something about useless wheels and snack-addicted livestock. You offer to help, but are promptly handed a bucket and told to shoo the goats. One of them head-butts your knee. Another steals your sandal. Meanwhile, someone's horse has wandered off during the storm and is now being lured back with a song and a handful of dried lentils. It works. You're not sure how. Once the chaos settles, a decision is made: leave the broken cart behind. The driver argues, begs, pleads. No one listens. Out here, there's no room for sympathy. Only speed, endurance, and the vague hope that tomorrow will be slightly less punishing than today. The driver finally consents to throw what he can onto other carts, while the goats, now full and entirely unhelpful, wander off into the hills. You remount your donkey. He gives you a look that says, "Told you this would happen." You nod. He's probably right. The path starts to climb, and your thighs burn. You pass the time trying to hum a song from your own century, but it feels absurdly out of place here. Instead, you start counting donkeys. There are 17. 1 is blind in one eye. 3 are named Khosrow. You give up after that. You ride past a man walking barefoot, carrying a bundle of silk so tightly wound it might be his life savings. He walks with a limp but refuses every offer of a ride. "Trust my legs more than beasts," he says, and keeps hobbling forward. A boy in the caravan begins retelling a story about a silk trader who supposedly vanished in the desert, only to return 3 years later claiming he'd been abducted by cloud spirits and taught the secrets of immortality. He died a week later after choking on a raisin, but the boy insists this only proves the story, because raisins were rare, and maybe the spirits didn't teach Heimlich maneuvering. Around mid-afternoon, the wind picks up again, not a storm, this time, but just enough to make the sand dance across the path like mischievous ghosts. It's beautiful, in a haunting sort of way. You wonder if the Silk Road has always been this strange, or if it's simply reacting to you personally. As the caravan crests another ridge, the view opens up, endless plains in every direction, the faint shimmer of heat on the horizon, and, if your eyes aren't deceiving you, a few scattered ruins of what might have once been a watchtower or a fort. The caravan master pauses, scans the landscape, then grunts and waves everyone forward. "We'll rest at the broken wall," he calls. "No more stops till then." You sigh, gritting your teeth, sweat on your brow, sandal half missing, and 1 goat-related knee bruise to your name. Welcome to the real Silk Road. Sun, sand, swearing, and somehow, still hundreds of miles to go. There's a moment, just after the caravan crests the ridge and starts to descend onto the flats, when you realize something ominous. You've run out of water. Not almost out. Not a little left in the bottom. Out. Bone-dry skin, limp water skin, tongue on sandpaper out. You jiggle the pouch, hoping for a miracle. A single drop would feel like ambrosia. Instead, you get a sad wheeze of air and maybe a hint of apricot memory. You're not alone. Around you, others are doing similar water rituals, tipping, sniffing, shaking, praying. The sun is directly overhead now, an oppressive golden hammer pounding on your back. The air shimmers with heat. Even the breeze has stopped, as if it too couldn't bear the weight of this hour. This is the first desert stretch. There are more ahead, but this one is apparently famous for turning travelers into mummies. No shade. No water. No settlements. Just heat, hallucinations, and the slow realization that you're an organic raisin with legs. Your lips are cracked. Your boots are damp from sweat and feel like they've fused to your ankles. Every movement makes your tunic scrape against you like burlap sandpaper. You think longingly of cold fruit, of ice cubes, of swimming pools. Pools. A hallucination, clearly, but you swear you see one just off the trail, glimmering and blue. You blink. It's a rock. Of course it is. Khosrow trudges ahead of you, unbothered. He's somehow managed to drool on his own shoulder, which, in this context, feels like showing off. You'd do anything for that kind of moisture. He glances back at you once, possibly to taunt you. The caravan thins as people try to space themselves for better airflow. You try walking for a while, just to stretch your legs and shift the pain. It turns out your legs are made of glass and noodles. After 20 paces, your knees are trembling and your vision pulses with heat. You remount the donkey, ashamed and winded from walking less than the length of a football field. Someone near the front begins singing. It's a low, wordless melody, meant more for rhythm than entertainment. Others pick it up, murmuring along, creating a sound like a lullaby stretched across time and sand. You join in. Not because you know the tune, but because it gives you something to hold on to. An hour in, the jokes start. Dry humor. Pun intended. Anyone want a hot bath? One man asks, wiping his forehead with the last dry corner of his sleeve. I brought a fan, another replies, waving a stick. Just needs wind. Someone tries to offer desert tea, an empty cup full of air and dreams. There's laughter. Not because it's funny, but because despair without humor is just plain despair. And on the Silk Road, even a bad joke is worth its weight in water. As you press forward, you spot strange things in the sand, old pots, shattered wheels, the bones of a long-dead pack animal. Evidence of those who didn't make it. No one stops to examine. No one wants to know. The desert keeps its stories dry and well-preserved. You finally reach a small, craggy outcrop, a cruel mockery of shade. Everyone collapses into whatever sliver of shadow they can find. The air under the rocks is barely cooler, but even 2 degrees feels like a miracle. You sit. You don't talk. You simply exist, letting the sweat evaporate from your skin in waves. You stare at your boots, now covered in a film of dust so fine it could pass for flour. You remember that dust is made of tiny particles of rock and skin and think, great. I'm wearing history. The caravan master allows only a 10-minute stop. Longer, and we melt, he grunts. He's not wrong. A merchant near you opens a pouch and pulls out a strip of jerky. He offers you a bite. You decline. The thought of anything dry entering your body right now is laughable. He shrugs and chews it slowly, like he's trying to absorb water from his own willpower. Someone else produces a single fig, carefully wrapped in linen. They divide it among 4 people. You get a corner. It tastes like heaven. Sweet, chewy, moist. You briefly consider licking your fingers but realize they taste like donkey leather and powdered regret. The break ends. Back to the trail. The sun is relentless. It has moved slightly west, now slanting just enough to blind you from the side. You lower your headscarf, fashion it into a makeshift visor, and squint into the brightness. This part of the route is flat. Too flat. The lack of features makes you feel like you're not moving at all, like you're stuck in a cruel, sunburned loop. You keep passing the same twisted shrub. You keep stepping on the same cracked stone. You start to wonder if time is real or just another Silk Road illusion. You're so thirsty you start fantasizing. Not about water anymore. About clouds. Rain. Mornings where you don't wake up sticky and coughing. Afternoons where you don't smell like horse and sandal rot. You'd give your coin pouch, your donkey, maybe even your own dignity for a cold breeze. Dignity is overrated, anyway. Then, salvation. A shout from the front, well ahead. You perk up like a desert plant after a drizzle. The group surges forward, energy restored by hope alone. Sure enough, a stone well appears in the distance, flanked by a few scrubby trees and the sun-bleached bones of a past shelter. It takes everything you have not to sprint. When you arrive, there's a line, of course. The bucket is slow. The pulley is ancient. But no one complains. The silence is reverent. When it's finally your turn, you splash a handful of water onto your face and feel like your soul has been rewound. You sip. Slowly. It tastes like minerals and damp stone. The best drink of your life. You refill your water skin like it's sacred. It is. You live. Just barely. You've just had your first proper drink of water in what feels like a lifetime, and things are finally, starting to feel manageable again, when the rumors begin to swirl. Not the fun kind, like a trader's scandalous love affair in Samarkand. No, these are the wide-eyed, half-whispered sort that make people suddenly check their belt knives and pull their coin pouches closer. Bandits. The word passes through the caravan like a gust of icy wind, despite the fact that the air is still stifling and heavy. You hear it first from a boy who's been walking barefoot for most of the trip, now wide-eyed and gripping his satchel like it holds the meaning of life. "My uncle was robbed on this route," he mutters to no one in particular. "They didn't even take his money. Just his boots. Left him walking back in his socks." A rider further ahead adds, "They're horsemen. Real fast. They hit just before dusk. Melt away into the cliffs before you can blink." A woman carrying jars of rosewater says nothing, but makes a slow circle around her cart with a blade drawn, scanning the horizon. The caravan master hears the murmurs and waves them off, but you notice how he rides a little straighter in the saddle now, and how two of the guards, men who'd been half asleep for the past hour, are suddenly very alert. The caravan picks up speed, everyone moving with more urgency and fewer jokes. You try to keep calm. Maybe it's just paranoia. Maybe someone saw shadows and decided it was danger. But then you spot them. Far out on the ridge, barely visible against the sky. 3 silhouettes on horseback. Not moving. Not approaching. Just watching. You point them out to the nearest merchant. He glances up, mutters something under his breath, and promptly ties a cloth over his gold-stamped saddle. You ask what's happening. He doesn't answer. Instead, he mutters something to the man beside him. A new sort of silence spreads, thicker than before. The caravan master rides ahead and speaks briefly with one of the guards. The guard nods and disappears off the trail into the rocky hills, likely circling to scout or, more likely, to offer bribes. You hadn't realized bribe money was part of the journey. No one told you you'd need a corruption fund just to make it past lunch. Your donkey senses the tension, too. Khosrow, usually indifferent to all forms of human anxiety, snorts and picks up speed, his hooves tapping the trail with more purpose. You pat him gently. "If we get through this, I'll give you my last date," you whisper. It's a big promise. For now, the riders on the ridge don't move. They just watch. Like wolves waiting for weakness. You try to estimate how far they are, far enough that it would take a few minutes to reach you at full gallop, but close enough that your skin prickles with every heartbeat. The caravan descends into a dry riverbed, a perfect ambush spot, you think helpfully. The cliffs rise on either side, and your mind begins racing. What would you do if they came? Throw your bag? Play dead? Try to bribe them with that jade pebble the teen told you was magical? The caravan speeds up again. The carts rattle and bounce more violently over the stones. You're now fully in try not to think mode. People are tightening their belts, checking their flasks, and whispering prayers to gods you've never heard of. Suddenly, someone shouts. Up ahead, a rider appears, this one wearing a red sash across his chest. He approaches fast, but not aggressively. The caravan halts. All noise drops. You grip the saddle horn and feel your mouth go dry again, despite the well. The man speaks to the caravan master in low tones. You can't hear what's said, but you can see the effect. Coins change hands. A few nods. No shouting. The rider gestures toward the hills, then turns and gallops away. No attack. No arrows. No dramatic chase. Just silence. The caravan master returns, looking grim. "Keep moving," he says. "We've paid. They'll leave us alone. Today." Today. The word sits heavy. You press forward, trying to process what just happened. There's a sense of temporary relief in the group, like you've all just been spared something you didn't want to name. Someone laughs, too loudly, and it sounds like a cracked jug. A merchant beside you mutters, "Next time, they might not take money." You wish he hadn't said it. Khosrow snorts again, as if agreeing. He pushes forward, and you let him set the pace. You pass a man muttering curses in Greek, a woman counting prayer beads like they're the only thing keeping her legs moving, and a child sleeping upright in a basket tied to the back of a mule. You start looking differently at every shadow. Every rock that's a little too tall. Every dust plume that might be hooves. The road that once just felt long now feels like a thin thread stretched tight across a blade. But slowly, the tension begins to ease. The sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon. The cliffs fall away behind you, and the land flattens again. Still dry, still endless, but with no more riders in sight. The caravan slows. People breathe again. Water is passed around. Someone even begins humming. The guards ride a little less stiffly now, and one cracks a joke about bandits preferring silk to spices, and that no one's safe if they smell like cinnamon. You laugh. Not because it's funny, but because you're still alive. And on the Silk Road, that's more than some can say. Night on the Silk Road is not what you imagined. You probably pictured a quiet camp beneath a moonlit sky, the air cool and still, the soft sound of music or gentle conversation drifting between travelers. Perhaps even a cup of warm broth in your hands, a blanket across your shoulders, and a flickering fire nearby to keep the cold at bay. In reality, it's chaos. Strange, whispery, unpredictable chaos. It starts with the campsite itself. The caravan master chooses a flat patch of dry ground near the ruins of what was once a guard post, now just 3 leaning walls and a pile of bricks shaped like a sitting camel. There's barely enough space for everyone, so people start improvising. Tents lean against carts, blankets stretch between branches, and someone ends up sleeping in a basket, not a child, an adult. Voluntarily. For back support, they claim. Your job? Gather firewood. You and 3 others are sent scrambling into the darkness with a donkey and 2 oil lanterns. It's not romantic. It's not even safe. The desert at night is full of noises, hissing winds, the chirp of unseen insects, and once, a sound like a laugh that came from underground. One of your companions insists it was just a fox. You're not so sure. You find enough dried scrub to pretend you've contributed. When you return, the campfire is already lit, and a ring of tired, smudged faces huddle around it. People take turns heating thin stews in dented copper pots, dipping in bits of bread, chewing slowly, reverently. You're handed a bowl of something that smells like boiled turnips and cumin. You don't ask what it is. You eat it, because warm food is warm food. The night air is cooler. Finally, you feel your sweat begin to dry, and the pain in your feet dulls to a manageable throb. You watch the stars emerge above the desert, brilliant and scattered, more than you've ever seen in your life. Someone nearby points out constellations in Persian. Another counters in Arabic. A third insists those same stars have different names in the Far East. You believe them all. Out here, truth is flexible. Then come the stories. It begins, as these things always do, with someone casually mentioning death. A man from Herat recounts the tale of a lost caravan that entered the Valley of the Whispering Bones and never returned. They say you can still hear their voices in the wind, he says, voice low, eyes wide, asking for water. He drinks from his flask. Everyone shifts slightly closer to the fire. A woman tells a story about a cursed mirror traded in Kasha that showed not reflections, but memories someone else wanted to forget. It cracked the night its owner died, she adds, stirring her stew without looking up. The bell monk, yes, him again, chimes in with a chant that he claims wards off ghost caravans. You don't even know what a ghost caravan is, but you repeat the chant under your breath, just in case. The sound of his tiny bells dancing on the night wind is oddly soothing. Laughter comes more easily now, helped along by fatigue and spice. A game of riddles begins. The questions are ancient, confusing, and strangely poetic. 1. What has one voice, no feet, but walks beside you all day? You guess your shadow. It's correct. You feel a flicker of pride. Then someone asks you for another. You freeze and offer, what has 4 legs in the morning? They groan. Apparently, that riddle's already a cliché out here. The fire begins to die down. People drift off to their sleeping mats or makeshift shelters. A few stay behind, eyes half closed, staring into the embers like they're searching for lost futures. The stars are brighter now, pressed tight against the dark velvet of the sky. You lie on your back, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, your head resting on your bundled cloak. Khosrow is nearby, snoring softly, which is both reassuring and mildly irritating. You try to sleep. You really do. But there's no silence here, only different kinds of noise. The wind howls intermittently, high and reedy like someone singing through cracked lips. Someone is sleep-talking in what sounds like old Turkic. You hear a pot clatter in the dark, then silence. A baby cries, is hushed, then starts again. The bells jingle. Then, the flute. Faint. Far. Familiar. His back. That mysterious flute player from earlier in the journey, the one you thought might have disappeared into the sandstorms of time, returns just as the moon reaches its peak. His music floats across the camp like incense, haunting, uneven, almost mournful. No one reacts. No one even stirs. You wonder if you're the only one hearing it. You pull your blanket tighter, but your eyes stay open. The sky overhead looks endless. A traveler beside you whispers, half asleep, "The stars are watching us." It sounds like nonsense. It also sounds exactly right. Out here, logic takes a backseat. You don't measure time in minutes anymore, but in footsteps and firelight. You don't measure safety by walls, but by the mood of a caravan and whether or not the guards are singing. You don't even measure yourself in your old ways. Success, wealth, identity. You are now defined by simpler things: warmth, water, a whole pair of shoes, a donkey that still likes you. Sleep comes slowly. Then all at once. You drift off to the sound of the fire crackling low, of camels grumbling in the distance, of a flute calling softly to whatever spirits wander the sands at night. This, somehow, is your new normal. Dawn doesn't arrive on the Silk Road with fanfare. It seeps. You wake to the color gray, sky, sand, faces, even the fire's leftover ash. There's no birdsong. Just the slow clatter of someone refastening a saddle strap, the groan of a stiff joint, the unmistakable gurgle of someone trying to clear their throat after snoring directly into their own blanket all night. You sit up, your neck protesting, your lower back practically writing its own will. Khosrow is already awake. He's chewing on something that used to be your tent flap. You don't stop him. Someone nearby mumbles, "Slept like a stone." Someone else mutters, "Slept on a stone." You check your feet, swollen, dusty, impressively blistered, and your nose, which now resembles a boiled plum thanks to yesterday's sun. You rub your eyes, which makes everything worse, and wipe your face with a rag that is technically clean only by Silk Road standards. Breakfast is already being passed around: hard cheese, flatbread, and a porridge that somehow manages to be both burnt and undercooked. You eat it anyway, because calories are calories, and your body feels like it was in a fight with gravity, and lost. The caravan prepares slowly, like a giant animal waking from a nap. Packs are secured, flasks are topped off, tents are collapsed and folded into shapes no one can recreate later. Someone shouts something about a missing shoe. Another curses about a stolen cooking pot, though most suspect it was simply turned into a chamber pot overnight. It happens. You're learning the rhythms of this life. The way people grumble in the mornings but still help tie knots. The way nothing fits quite right on the third day of riding. The way travelers become part of the machine, shuffled between noise and movement and sand and silence. It's not community, exactly, but it's a survival pact. Once the sun clears the horizon, it becomes urgent to move. The desert will roast you if you dawdle. The caravan master blows a horn, 3 low, rasping notes that sound like a dying yak, and suddenly, things start rolling. You remount Khosrow, who snorts in protest. You whisper an apology, promising him a fresh fig if you ever find one. He doesn't seem impressed. Today's terrain is unforgiving. The path becomes rocky, rising steadily toward a low mountain pass. This isn't the desert you've come to know. This is stone country. The sand gives way to jagged shale and hard-packed earth riddled with fractures. The heat hasn't left, but now it bounces off rock walls and ambushes you from below. It feels like you're riding through an oven that someone forgot to turn off after baking pottery. And then come the switchbacks. You thought you hated walking before. You thought your thighs had suffered enough. You were wrong. The path twists violently up the slope, snaking back and forth in a slow, cruel ascent that makes every step feel like a betrayal. You pass the same boulder 3 times. You're not climbing a mountain, you're being mocked by one. Even Khosrow, champion of indifference, begins to pant. Around you, the caravan stretches thin. People separate by speed, by stubbornness, by whatever reserves of salt and sugar still run through their bloodstream. Some riders dismount to spare their animals. Some walk alongside their carts, one hand on the wood, as if that will somehow help. You try walking for a bit, immediately regret it, and clamber back up. You've started naming your blisters now. One is called the General. He's taken command of your left heel. A guard rides past with a small drum strapped to his saddle. He beats it softly, more rhythm than melody, to keep people marching. You focus on it. 1 beat, 1 step, 1 breath. Midway through the climb, someone behind you begins reciting a poem. Slow, rhythmic, hypnotic. You don't understand the words, but it pulls you forward like a rope. When they stop, someone else picks up a song. Then another. The language changes every few verses. You recognize none of it. You understand all of it. The top of the ridge is marked by a stone cairn, surrounded by scraps of fabric tied to sticks, offerings left by other travelers. Worn, sun-bleached flags bearing wishes, prayers, curses, or maybe just desperate sarcasm. You stop and tie your own offering, a torn strip of cloth from your sleeve, stiff with sweat and dust. You whisper no prayer. You've already used your words for walking. The view from the top is breathtaking. Not metaphorically, literally. You have no breath left. But it is beautiful. Below lies a valley, wide, golden, littered with occasional tufts of green and the dark snaking shadow of a dry riverbed. Somewhere far ahead, too far to see, awaits the next oasis. You know it's there. You have to believe it's there. The descent is faster, but no kinder. Your legs shake with each step, and your donkey stumbles once on loose stone. You both recover, but now you're hyper-aware of how quickly things can go wrong. A cart loses a wheel and tips halfway down the path. No one is hurt, but the goods are scattered: dried fruit, textiles, a jar of something pickled that cracks open and immediately clears the sinuses of every living thing nearby. A group of travelers pauses near a cave to rest. Someone swears it's sacred. Someone else swears it's full of bats. You pass without investigating. The heat grows again as you reach the valley floor, but now there's a breeze, a small mercy. You feel it flutter against your face and nearly cry. You pass a lone fig tree, and for a brief second, you consider stealing one for Khosrow. Then you remember the bandits, the snakes, the possibility of tree spirits, and keep moving. The sun dips toward the west again. Shadows stretch. The caravan slows, the energy of the morning climb now just a fading bruise in your muscles. You're not sure how much farther you'll go today. You only know this: you're still moving. And out here, that's enough. You thought you'd seen dust before. You were wrong. This part of the Silk Road has perfected dust. It rises in columns behind every hoof and wheel. It clings to your face, your ears, your eyebrows. It fills your nose, lines your throat, turns your tongue into sandpaper. You cough, and it's like exhaling chalk. Every breath tastes like a room no one's opened in years. The wind doesn't help. It lifts the finer grains into the air and just leaves them there, floating like malevolent glitter. Your skin itches constantly. You scratch once, and a thin layer of what might have once been your dignity flakes off into the breeze. Even Khosrow looks annoyed. He keeps shaking his head, his ears twitching like a man trying to pretend nothing is wrong while clearly being extremely wronged. His tail swishes like a metronome of passive-aggressive judgment. Today is not an ambitious day. The caravan's pace is slower now, partly from exhaustion, partly because the terrain has become oddly soft underfoot. Not quite sand, not quite soil, more like the ground has forgotten how to be solid. Each step sinks slightly, dragging down energy like a tax on movement. The path narrows again between two low ridges of sun-baked stone, and the heat reflects back at you from both sides. The effect is like walking through a hallway of hairdryers. Your clothing, once stiff with sweat, now crackles with dried salt. The caravan master doesn't speak much anymore. His voice is a husky rasp used only for commands: hold, move, watch left. Even his horse seems to plod with a kind of veteran's despair. As the morning stretches into midday, something new emerges: insects. Tiny, invisible, wildly annoying insects. They appear first as specks around your donkey's ears, then on your hands, then, terrifyingly, inside your shirt. Someone swears they're sand flies. Someone else insists they're desert gnats. You don't care what they're called. They bite. There is no defense. You swat. You twitch. You try to cover up. It's no use. You finally accept that for the next few hours, you are nothing more than a buffet on legs. Conversation dries up. The caravan is reduced to its essentials: movement, sweat, sun, dust, bugs. You no longer care about your appearance. You no longer care what your sweat smells like. You no longer care who sees you drooling slightly while you nap on your donkey between tremors of consciousness. You've become a creature of motion and irritation. Mid-afternoon brings a strange, dreamlike encounter. A group of travelers approaches from the opposite direction, eastbound, while you trudge westward. They're led by a woman in a green robe riding a white camel with silver bangles on its legs. Behind her, a half-dozen men and women walk with slow, serene confidence, their faces partially veiled but their eyes bright and untroubled. They look clean. That alone makes them mystical. They nod as they pass, but say little. One of them reaches into a pouch and offers you a dried apricot. You accept it like a sacred gift. It's soft, still moist. You could weep. Before you can thank them, they're gone, gliding across the dust like mirages that simply chose to be real for a moment. The apricot becomes your emotional support fruit. You don't eat it. You just hold it. It's your hope, your compass, your one bright spot in a world made entirely of beige and blister. Later, someone lets out a cheer. You look up. Trees. Actual, living, green trees. A few stunted tamarisk bushes rise near a shallow dip in the terrain, followed by palms, tall, narrow, impossibly elegant palms. Beneath them, shade. Actual, measurable, God-blessed shade. And water. A pool, murky but present, ringed with camels and slumped figures who've clearly arrived moments before. The caravan practically stumbles into the oasis. People throw themselves to the ground. You do the same. Your hands sink into damp soil and it feels like velvet compared to the stone and grit of earlier. You bury your face in your scarf, just to breathe moist air. Khosrow lowers his head and begins to drink with slow, greedy gulps. You follow suit. The water tastes slightly metallic and faintly of old leaves. It's perfect. The mood lifts slightly. People begin to talk again. Someone produces a flute. Not the mysterious one this time. This is a new flute. The player isn't as good. But it doesn't matter. Music returns to the air. A few travelers start to cook something that smells like lentils and garlic. Someone laughs for the first time in hours. This is not civilization. But it's close enough to pretend. You take the opportunity to clean yourself. Minimally. You wipe your face, pour a few precious drops over your hands. You even dare to rinse your socks, which have begun to smell like ancient tombs. You hang them on a branch to dry, though you suspect nothing short of divine intervention will fix them now. The caravan master allows a long rest. People take naps. Some pray. Others sharpen blades or inspect cargo. A game of dice begins near the central palm, and a crowd gathers to shout suggestions and cheer on the luckiest gambler. A teenage girl with a coin tucked behind her ear and an uncanny sense of when to bet. As evening nears, the sun lowers behind a ridge and the world changes color. Everything goes golden. The dust glows. The trees sway. Even the insects seem gentler. You bite into your apricot, at last, and let the sweetness melt on your tongue. For a moment, you're not a desperate wanderer. You're not aching, blistered, or baked like flatbread. You're just a person at an oasis, at peace. The caravan won't stay long. There's still ground to cover before nightfall. But for now, the Silk Road is kind. You don't want to leave the oasis. It's the first time you've felt even remotely human in days. But the sun's descent into the western horizon means the clock is ticking, and the caravan master, who probably hasn't smiled since birth, declares, "We make 3 more hours today. Or sleep with the scorpions." Nobody argues. You climb back onto Khosrow. His ears flick in protest. He, too, was enjoying the shade and the puddle of slightly too warm water. You both let out the same sigh at the same moment. You're becoming synced. The evening stretch is supposed to be easier. Cooler air, fewer flies, a gentle breeze whispering through the sparse scrub. But the Silk Road is never as easy as advertised. You're barely an hour out of the oasis when the terrain changes again. The sand reappears, but this time it's loose and deep. It drags at the wheels, saps the strength from every step. Camels grunt. Mules whine. You feel like you're walking through flour with bricks in your shoes. This is the edge of the Taklamakan Desert, the desert of death, according to some travelers. You try to ignore that title. Others call it the Sea of Dunes, which sounds poetic, until you realize it means you'll be walking through an endless undulating landscape of false hills and hopeless mirages. You start losing your bearings. It's not that the trail disappears, it's still there, just faint, marked by the ghost prints of those who came before. But everything begins to look the same. The sky, the sand, even the caravan. You stare ahead, trying to stay focused on the person in front of you, only to realize it's not the same person anymore. You've drifted sideways. Somehow. You shuffle back into place, embarrassed and mildly concerned that you're going to wander into the dunes and vanish like a cautionary tale. Someone nearby mutters about sand spirits. You ignore it. Mostly. The light begins to shift. The desert changes color, beige to peach, then orange, then something between gold and blood. Shadows grow long and dramatic. You look behind and can't tell if the black shape trailing in your wake is your own or some exhausted piece of folklore trying to catch up. The air cools, at least. The wind turns soft again, brushing your face like an apology for earlier sins. You close your eyes for a moment and let it pass over you. When you open them, there's a line of small stones leading off the trail to the left. You ask someone what they are. Graves. They answer simply. You don't ask another question. By now, the caravan is a moving shadow, stretched thin across the sand. People are quiet. Tired. But there's something else beneath the fatigue, an awareness that night in the desert is a very different beast. You find out soon enough. As darkness creeps in, the warmth vanishes in minutes. What was once suffocating becomes sharp, brisk. You pull your cloak tighter. Khosrow's breath is visible now in short bursts. His unbothered. You, less so. The stars begin to appear. First, just a few. Then dozens. Then hundreds. By the time you reach the night's resting spot, a shallow hollow ringed with dry bushes, they've multiplied into thousands, lighting up the sky like spilled salt across a velvet cloth. You dismount, joints cracking like kindling. Your feet ache. Your mouth is dry. You are, in short, entirely undone. But those stars. You lie back, cloak pulled around your shoulders, head resting on your rolled-up satchel. Others do the same, forming a loose, tired circle around the low campfire. No tents tonight. The wind is gentle, the sand cold but soft. The guards post a few sentries, and even the caravan master loosens his belt and stretches out beside his horse. It's quiet. Someone starts singing again, low, slow, in a language you don't know. It feels old. Older than the Silk Road itself. The song has no clear melody. It drifts. People join in, humming. One person claps gently in rhythm, more heartbeat than percussion. You find yourself humming too. And then come the stories, again. But they are different now. Not ghost stories or warnings. These are personal. A man tells of leaving his family in Anch with nothing but a jar of olives and a half-written map. A woman recalls trading everything she owned for a single pearl necklace in Changan, then losing it in a river near Bactria and laughing the whole time. Someone recites a poem about two cities that can never meet because the roads between them only lead elsewhere. Everyone listens. And then, quietly, people begin to fall asleep. You stay awake a little longer, watching the stars, trying to trace constellations you don't recognize. The night air smells faintly of cumin and ash. Khosrow curls beside you, not touching, but close enough to remind you he's there. You don't dream. You just sink into the silence, into the sand, into the shared breath of dozens of exhausted travelers who, for this night at least, are safe beneath the ancient stars. You wake not to light, but to sound, a deep, reverberating clang like metal against stone. For one blurry second, you wonder if the sky is falling. Then you realize, it's the bell monk. He's walking a slow circle around the camp, gently tapping his bowl-shaped bell with a wooden mallet. It echoes strangely across the sand. The sun is still below the horizon, but the sky is beginning to shift from black to dark blue. People rise slowly. Some groan. Others just stare at nothing for a while, their faces hollowed out by another night on the edge of the world. You sit up and find your arms covered in fine grit. Your left hand is asleep. Khosrow is already awake and has wandered over to nudge your satchel open, clearly hunting for a snack. There's no breakfast today. Just movement. The caravan sets off before full light, hoping to gain ground before the sun resumes its usual campaign of skin-based terrorism. It's cold enough that you wrap your cloak tight around your head and neck. For the first half hour, everyone is eerily quiet. No chatter. No singing. No flute. Just the rhythmic thunk of hooves in sand and the soft rustle of cloth in motion. This morning's terrain is deceptive. The dunes here are low and wide, stretching into the distance like golden waves on a frozen ocean. But beneath the soft top layer, the sand shifts treacherously. Carts sink without warning. Donkeys stumble. Your own mount trips once, and you feel your heart leap into your throat. The caravan master rides ahead, scanning the horizon constantly. His horse's tail swishes like a metronome. Behind him, 2 guards stay close, eyes narrowed beneath their turbans. Everyone seems tenser today. Then, the smell hits. At first, it's faint, just something vaguely unpleasant riding on the wind. You think maybe it's another donkey relieving itself. But then it thickens, grows sour, sweet, in a way that makes your stomach churn. You hear murmuring ahead. Then the caravan slows. You push forward, standing in your stirrups to see. And you wish you hadn't. There, partially buried in the sand, is a broken cart, its wood splintered, its wheels shattered. Around it, scattered like forgotten chess pieces, are bundles of cloth, shattered pottery, and bodies. 3 of them. 2 curled tightly, 1 stretched out, face turned toward the sun. Their robes are faded, their skin like leather, their mouths agape. You can't tell how long they've been here. Days. Weeks. The desert preserves, after all. It mummifies. You feel your throat close. You look away. Someone begins to pray. Quietly. A few others join in. The caravan master dismounts, walks over, kneels beside the bodies. He says nothing, but you see him place a small silver coin on each person's chest. A ritual. Payment for safe passage, into the next life or across the next hill, who knows? You move on, shaken. The image clings to the inside of your eyelids. Not because it's shocking, but because it's possible. You think, that could have been us. You ride for hours after that with a renewed sense of fragility. Even the donkeys are quieter. Around midday, the terrain changes again. You enter a stretch known ominously as the Painted Hollow. The rocks here are red, orange, almost pink in places, wind-sculpted and smoothed into bizarre shapes. Faces, some say. Creatures, say others. You try not to look too closely. The trail winds between these formations like a river through frozen fire. Shadows play tricks on your eyes. One moment the path is empty. The next, you're convinced you see a figure watching from the rocks. You blink. It's gone. Someone behind you mutters, "Spirits live here." Someone else hisses at them to be quiet. You decide not to speak at all for the next stretch. A dust storm begins just as you emerge from the stone corridor. It's not violent, just inconvenient. Fine grains of powder swirl up into your face, your eyes, your ears. You tie your scarf tighter, squinting against the sting. The sky turns yellowish. The sun becomes a faint disk. Everyone looks like shadows wrapped in rags. You ride blind for a while, trusting the animal beneath you, trusting the silhouette ahead. You try not to think about veering off course, about becoming the next set of bones under the sand. By late afternoon, The storm lifts. Visibility returns. But something in you has shifted. You feel thinner. Less substantial. Like the wind has carried away a layer of who you were. The caravan stops early today, in a low basin protected by a ring of scrub-covered hills. People dismount slowly, like old furniture creaking into place. You're handed a tin bowl of lentils and rice, lukewarm, but flavorful. You eat with shaking hands. You realize you haven't spoken aloud in hours. As night falls, the temperature drops again. A few fires are lit. Small ones. Tightly controlled. The wind is still active, and sparks would be dangerous. Someone tells a story about a merchant who burned his entire caravan trying to cook rice in the wind. It's supposed to be funny. You don't laugh. Tonight, there are no songs. Just soft rustles, the clink of coins, the scraping of bowls, and the occasional muttered prayer. You lie back and watch the sky again. But this time, you're not comforted by the stars. This time, you're wondering how many people are buried just below the surface of this road. How many were never found? How many saw the same sky and believed it would protect them? Khosrow lies beside you. His belly rises and falls with slow, steady breaths. You envy him. You close your eyes. The sand is cold. Your skin is dry. Your back aches. You sleep, eventually. But you don't dream. You wake up with sand in your teeth. You're not sure how it got there. You slept with your scarf over your face, your mouth closed, your head tucked down like a hibernating tortoise. But somehow, the desert has found its way into your molars. You spit. It doesn't help. You're now convinced the Silk Road doesn't just stretch across continents. It infiltrates your very being. Everyone's moving slowly this morning. Not lazy. Just low on something, energy, morale, hope. You look around at the others, and the caravan is beginning to resemble a group of survivors rather than travelers. People's clothes are torn or patched with string. Faces are gaunt, cracked at the lips. Nobody speaks in full sentences anymore. Just gestures, murmurs, the occasional grunt that somehow communicates everything. Yes, I'm still alive. Barely. You realize you haven't seen a proper mirror in days, and you're fine with that. The only thing worse than being this tired would be seeing how tired you look. Today's path is flatter. Easier, physically, but mentally it's something else. The land is empty. Truly empty. Not barren like before, this is worse. A featureless plain of pale sand and dull stone that stretches in every direction, horizon to horizon, with nothing to orient yourself. No hills, no trees, no sunken trails. It's the kind of place where time vanishes. The kind of place where you can walk for 10 hours and feel like you've gone absolutely nowhere. You could close your eyes, spin in place, open them again, and have no idea if you're still facing west. The sky is too hazy to help, and the sun, when it rises, does so through a white sheen that removes all sense of direction. Everyone relies on the caravan master now. Completely. He checks a brittle map several times an hour, then makes small adjustments to the heading. You overhear a traveler muttering, "If he dies, we all die." You believe it. Khosrow trudges beneath you, his hooves kicking up little puffs of pale dust. His ears don't even flick anymore. He's entered a meditative state. You envy him again. Time passes strangely. Sometimes you feel like you've walked only 10 minutes, only to find your canteen nearly empty and the sun already high. Other times, you swear you've been walking for hours, and then hear someone say it's only just after dawn. Time stretches and compresses like a strange, sluggish accordion. Someone begins to sing a counting song, quiet, rhythmic. Not to entertain, but to mark time. 1 verse per 10 steps. They count to 100. Then start again. They keep going for what feels like the entire day. You hate it. You also depend on it. It's something to hold on to in the mental fog. Around mid-morning, a shape appears on the horizon. A tower. No, closer now. It's not a tower, but a rock formation. Tall, narrow, rising up from the plain like a finger pointing toward the gods. It's the first vertical object you've seen in hours, and it becomes a beacon. Everyone walks toward it, as if magnetized. When you reach it, the rock is covered in markings, scratched, carved, painted, weather-worn. Names in Persian, Chinese, Arabic. Dates. Symbols. Some of them centuries old. This is a place of memory. A halfway marker. Proof that others have passed through this nothingness and survived. You touch the stone. It's warm. And real. Someone adds their name. You do too. With your thumbnail, in a space just below an old inscription that reads something like Rizan, 1245. You wonder who Rizan was. You wonder if they made it. The caravan pauses there for a while. People sit at the base of the rock. Eat bits of dried fruit. Sip what's left of their water. Some sleep sitting up. A merchant begins reciting a poem, but gives up halfway through. No one has the strength to pretend to care. Then the journey resumes. You walk again. The sun rises higher. The light flattens the world. Everything looks like a bleached canvas stretched tight over something ancient and waiting. Your body stops complaining. It's done that too many times already. Now it just functions. 1 foot. Then the next. You barely notice the weight on your back anymore. It's part of you now. As much a part of you as your breath, your blisters, your sunburnt neck. Later, how much later, you don't know. You see something new, movement ahead. Small figures. Wagons. Another caravan. You don't speed up. You don't call out. That takes too much effort. You just keep walking until your groups merge, slowly, like two slow rivers. Their caravan is headed east. Yours, west. For a few minutes, the space between the two lanes is like a marketplace in miniature. People trading stories, spices, rumors. Someone offers you a piece of melon. You accept it with the kind of reverence usually reserved for religious relics. A boy from their group asks, "Is it true there's snow in the mountains ahead?" You shrug. Might be. You have no idea. You hope not. They vanish behind you, and the desert absorbs the echo of their passing. Evening comes. You stop walking. The camp is made hastily this time, just blankets on the ground, and a circle of dim lanterns around the camels. No fire tonight. Too much wind. Everyone wraps themselves tightly, faces hidden against the chill. You lie down and look up. And for the first time in days, you don't see stars. Just a pale haze across the sky, like the heavens themselves are tired. You fall asleep thinking about the rock with your name on it. That's your footprint now. Your proof you existed, even for a moment, in this place where everything disappears. You've stopped trying to guess what day it is. The Silk Road doesn't care about your calendar. It has its own rhythm, a mix of sunrise and exhaustion, of donkey steps and drifting sleep, of wind patterns and the sound of your own breath growing thin. Time has collapsed into sensation, heat, ache, hunger, thirst, movement, and sometimes, quiet fear. This morning, that fear comes early. There's a sound, sharp, unnatural, echoing across the low hills where the caravan camped for the night. At first, you think it's just a donkey braying or a pot clanging. But then it comes again. A short, sharp whistle. Then silence. Then a distant shout. Everyone freezes. The guards, normally half asleep until tea, are suddenly alert. Hands on hilts. eyes scanning the darkness before dawn. The caravan master raises one hand, and instantly, a hush settles over the group. Fires are snuffed. Voices drop to whispers. You see someone push a child gently under a cart. Bandits. You've heard the stories. Everyone has. But now, the word moves through the group like a spark through dry grass. Quietly, urgently, bandits, bandits, bandits. You tense, heart racing, mouth dry. You instinctively check your pouch. Not for gold, you don't have any, but for the one apricot seed you kept after the fruit from the oasis. A small token. A symbol of something kind. It's still there. You wait. The silence grows heavy. No one dares move. The camels shift uneasily. A woman mutters a prayer in Chinese. You feel Khosrow's side pressing lightly against yours, steady and solid. Eventually, miraculously, the tension breaks. The caravan master, after a long, calculating scan of the hills, waves his hand forward. Move. No one argues. Everyone would rather walk into the rising heat than wait for shadows to become men with blades. The day's march begins early. Still half dark, still quiet. Everyone glances over their shoulders for the first few hours, as if expecting pursuit. But it never comes. Still, the fear lingers like a second sun, unseen but scorching. And the terrain. Relentless. Today, the path climbs again. Not into mountains, exactly, but into something just as cruel, rolling highlands of loose rock and false passes. You keep thinking you've reached the top, only to find another slope waiting, and another beyond that. The altitude begins to show in your breath. Your steps shorten. Your thoughts scatter. Someone behind you vomits. Not from sickness, just from the thinness of the air. You've been told it would happen. Still, hearing it makes your stomach twist. The caravan grows quiet again. Not out of reverence or fatigue this time, but out of calculation. Everyone is counting how much water they have, how much food, how many steps they can still take. The wind whistles across the open stone like a mournful flute. You hate that it reminds you of that flute. The one you haven't heard in days. The one that made everything feel dreamlike and odd. Now, there's just wind. And dust. And stones. At midday, a merchant collapses. He just stops walking. Kneels. Then slumps sideways into the dust. His son shouts, runs to him. Someone else throws water on his face. A guard crouches down, checks for breath. There's a pulse. He's not dead. Just spent. They force him onto a cart. He'll ride until he recovers. Or doesn't. No one says it out loud, but you see it in their faces. It could be any of us next. The sun bears down again. You've stopped sweating. That's not good. The only thing that keeps you moving is stubbornness. And maybe fear. You don't know where this is going anymore. But you know you have to get there. Later, a traveler points to the horizon and says, "That ridge? On the other side, it's green." You don't believe them. No one does. Not until an hour later, when you reach the top. And there it is. A valley. Wide, sweeping, softly sloping. Dotted with trees. Real trees. With leaves. There's grass, or something like it. A stream glinting in the late sun. And, unbelievably, a cluster of tents. A trading post. You nearly collapse from relief. The caravan master grunts. Camp there tonight. Trade what you can. No one moves quickly, but everyone moves with purpose. You descend into the valley like dreamwalkers. The air cools slightly. The wind smells like moisture and ash and livestock. It's paradise, compared to where you've been. The trading post is more of a permanent camp than a town. Cloth-roofed stalls, clay hearths, one stone building with a prayer wheel out front. There's food, fresh, hot food. Spiced meat and flatbread and something green and leafy that might be spinach, or just hope disguised as spinach. You trade a spare pair of socks, filthy, stiff, but still whole, for a cup of something sweet and fermented. It makes your lips tingle. You don't care what's in it. The other travelers move among the stalls slowly, eyes wide, unsure if this is real. One woman buys a tiny copper bell. Another finds a spool of thread and sits right there on the ground, sewing up the hem of her robe with trembling fingers. You let Khosrow drink freely from the stream. He dips his nose deep and doesn't lift it for almost a full minute. You want to do the same. As night falls, you build no tent. You lie on a blanket in the grass, and stare up at a sky that feels kinder than it did before. The stars return. Someone sings. Someone else plays a flute, clumsily, but it doesn't matter. It's music. Real music. Not ghosts, not warnings. And for the first time, you feel a fragile thing blooming in your chest. Hope. You survived another day. You almost don't want to leave. This valley, this pocket of peace, feels like a world apart from the road that brought you here. The grass beneath your blanket still holds the coolness of night. The stream gurgles beside you, and the air smells faintly of firewood and cardamom. Someone nearby is still snoring. You're sure the noise would have annoyed you a week ago. Now, it's oddly comforting. Proof of other lives surviving, just like yours. But no one stays long on the Silk Road. The trading post isn't a home. It's a checkpoint. A breath between storms. The caravan is stirring again before full light. Traders roll up their mats. Campfires smolder down to charcoal. A few merchants from the outpost try to hawk final wares: salt, dried plums, oil for cracked feet. You see a traveler haggle for a comb. Not because they need it. Just for the memory of having something soft and ordinary again. You refill your water skin, tug your cloak tight, and climb onto Khosrow. He seems reluctant too. He takes one last look at the grass, gives it a slow chew, and sighs. Then onward. The path out of the valley is narrow and winding. It climbs gently through sloped meadows, then sharpens into a ridged trail where the wind picks up again. Below, you catch glimpses of distant scrubland returning, browns and reds replacing green. The Silk Road has no intention of staying soft. As you ride, you think back to how you felt on day one, awkward, excited, curious, convinced you might actually enjoy this. Now, you are not the same. You've become leaner, quieter, more aware of your body in motion. You listen to your bones now. You understand wind by its smell. You can spot a snake hole from 20 paces and identify 3 types of blister by texture. You are not strong, exactly. But you are still here. And out here, that's everything. By mid-morning, the caravan rejoins the main route, a long, flat track etched into the earth by thousands of travelers before you. Deep ruts mark the ground. You ride in the shadows of centuries. Some call this section the whisper path because when the wind moves right, the rocks seem to hum. And they do hum. Low, vibrating tones that rise and fall with each gust. You catch yourself humming along. It feels inevitable. Someone rides up beside you, a woman with a bright blue scarf and a cluster of bells at her waist. She nods at you. Tired? She asks. You nod. She smiles. Then you're doing it right. She rides on. The bells jingle behind her, fading into the wind. You pass a crumbling shrine just before noon. A stack of stones with bits of colored thread tied to a stick. You dismount, walk up, and add your own, a frayed strip from your undershirt. You say no prayer, but you press your palm to the rock. It's warm. It thrums, as if it remembers every hand that's touched it before. In the afternoon, the sky turns strange. Clouds move in, fast, rolling across the sun like a heavy lid. The light goes pale and flat. The temperature drops. For a moment, the road feels almost haunted. The caravan master raises his hand. Everyone stops. You wait. Then, rain. Not a lot. Just enough. It starts with a few fat drops, cold and heavy. Then a soft, steady drizzle. You raise your face to the sky and let it hit you. The dust on your skin turns to streaks. Your cloak dampens. Khosrow shakes himself once, then resigns himself to the wet. It only lasts half an hour. But it's enough to remind you, even the desert isn't always dry. Even the Silk Road can change. That evening, the caravan stops near a cluster of trees, a gift after the long, open road. There's a well here, half covered in vines, and stones arranged in a half circle as if left by someone who hoped others would find this place and rest. You build no tent again. You just lie back beneath the leaves, listening to the wind move through the branches like fingers over a harp. You eat your last piece of dried meat. Share your last apricot pit with Khosrow. He sniffs it. Declines. Then you rest. You've survived the Silk Road. Not the whole thing, maybe. Not yet. But a stretch of it. A piece. Enough to know what it takes, and what it costs. As the stars come out, bright and scattered, you realize something quietly profound. The Silk Road doesn't want your comfort. It wants your attention. And it gets it. Every second. Every blister. Every cold night and every scorching afternoon. Every ghost story and stolen melon. Every laugh by firelight, every silence under the stars. Every time you thought you wouldn't make it, and did anyway. You're still here. And tomorrow, you keep walking. And now, traveler, you can rest. You've walked the dust-choked miles. Felt the sting of the desert sun. Breathed thin air through cracked lips. You've met strangers who became companions, crossed valleys that felt like dreams, and stared into night skies older than memory. You've touched ancient stones, tasted fire-roasted lentils, and found music in silence. You didn't just survive the Silk Road. You endured it. You adapted to it. You became part of its long, winding story, just like the traders, monks, messengers, and misfits who walked it centuries before you. And while your journey might have been imagined, the feeling it leaves behind, that slow hush in your chest, that heaviness in your limbs, that echo of caravan bells and distant flutes, that's real. So now, let the road fade behind you. Let the stars blur softly into sleep. Let the sounds of hooves and footsteps dissolve into the quiet. And let yourself drift. You're not on the Silk Road anymore. You're warm and safe and still. Your body can soften. Your thoughts can settle. You've made it through the dust and the cold and the unknown. There's nothing left to do now. No more hills to climb. No more blisters to count. Just the slow, calm breath of night. In and out. You've earned your rest. Sleep well, traveler.